Thank you very much, Anna Maria, and thank all of you for being here today. Thank our partners here for the great success they've achieved with Forbes in Mexico, Forbes in Central America, and in South America. Thank you very, very much. I've been asked today to make a few remarks about the economic outlook for the global economy, the U.S. economy, and most specifically, observations about your economy here in Mexico. I want to make mention, just at the beginning, again, there's been a lot of discussion about what has been achieved here in Mexico, but it cannot be said enough. It cannot be said enough that what you have been doing on structural reforms is not only good for Mexico, but also a model for the rest of the world. Europe has not been making structural reforms and is paying a price for it. My country, the United States, has not been making needed structural reforms, and we are paying the price for it. Japan is talking about structural reforms, but it has not made the reforms on the scale that Mexico has achieved. India wants to make structural reforms, and therefore Mexico will be a model for that. Indonesia, the same thing. Here in the Americas, Mexico's success is essential, not only for Mexico, but for the region. Brazil is now floundering. Chile, and I'm being blunt here, is going in the wrong direction and undoing their reforms. So it is essential for Mexico to show the way to the Venezuelas, the Argentinas, the Chiles, and other countries that make huge mistakes. If Mexico gets it right, the region will get it right, and indeed, the whole developing world will get it right. You look around the world and there's a feeling that things are unraveling, that we are in a very delicate condition. We all know what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Very, very dangerous. It could lead to the unraveling of NATO. We all know what is happening in the Middle East. And unfortunately, if the Islamic State is to be defeated, my country has to make the decision to send in more forces than it has done now. It'll take 10 to 15,000 U.S. troops on the ground to provide intelligence, to provide spotters, to provide training, to actually defeat this malignant force. We've not made that decision yet. We've not faced what it's actually going to take to do and achieve the rhetoric of our president. In terms of Yemen, bad forces have triumphed there, which will pose a threat to Saudi Arabia. We all know about the threat of Ebola, very slow response in containing that. You look at the global economy. Europe is a mess. France is in recession. Southern Europe is slowing again. Germany is slowing. Japan is in a recession. China is going through turbulence. India has already had slow growth. We'll see if the new government can implement needed reforms. I've mentioned Brazil, now going into recession. Argentina, we all know what's happening there. The U.S. economy, only so-so, will grow about 2.5%, maybe 3%, but we're like the baseball player. At the end of the season, instead of batting .350, we've been batting about .240. In the U.S., the conditions are there for great growth. There's consensus now on the need to radically reform and simplify our tax code. We could make progress on that on the business side if the president desires to do so. Healthcare has been a mess in the United States, posing a huge burden on small businesses. Our Federal Reserve has made huge mistakes. So-called quantitative easing has had the perverse effect of hurting the economy rather than stimulating the economy. The way it was done, it made it very easy for government to borrow, easy for large companies to borrow, but restricted credit to small and new businesses through regulation. And so, as you know, small and new businesses create the most jobs in a growing economy. And that is why even though our unemployment rate has come down somewhat, it is still high at this phase in a recovery, and what is called the labor participation rate is still at a miserable level. The question is, after our November midterm elections, will our president follow the path that your president did when he took office in 2012, and that is sit down and try to reach a consensus with the various elements in our Congress. If he does so in good faith, rapid agreement would be reached on corporate tax reform. Rapid agreement would be reached on beginnings of immigration reform. So right now, though, we don't know what our president will do after the elections, but right now Mexico is just about the only country that is delivering on structural reforms. And you already know what you've been doing from oil to education. And so the president does deserve high praise for that. But this brings us to two crucial points. The minister mentioned the need to follow through on these reforms, implementing these reforms in a rapid fashion, and not let the complexity and the detail bog it down and therefore undo the momentum. You cannot be slow on this. You must maintain a real sense of urgency in making these reforms real. Doing so will trigger more foreign direct investment as people see these reforms are lasting and not just in a constitution, but not implemented in the real world. On fiscal reform, one can understand Mexico's challenge. Your tax base, as the minister indicated, is too small, a small percent of GDP. You have an over-reliance on revenues from Pemex. The government and the minister mentioned the need for more money for infrastructure and social spending. All that is true. And here I will be candid with you. Raising taxes, however, and enacting new taxes is counterproductive to the goal of a vibrant economy. It has already hurt your economy at a delicate time. When you make the kind of structural reforms that you are now doing, you need to have an environment where those reforms aren't undone because people feel, well, you made these reforms, and yet the economy has slowed. My standard of living has gone down. The cost of living goes up. What was the purpose of it? To make these reforms sink deep roots, you need to have immediately a much more vibrant economy. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, but the direction of fiscal reform should go in the opposite direction of what has been done so far, and that is simplify your tax code and cut tax rates across the board. Why? Because, as you know, taxes just don't raise revenue for government. Taxes are also a price and a burden. The tax you pay on income is the price you pay for working. Tax on profit, the price you pay for being successful. A tax on capital gains, the price you pay for taking risks that work out. And the concept's very simple. When you lower the burden and price on good things such as work, risk-taking, and success, you'll get more of those good things. You must avoid the trap that Greece has fallen into. You must avoid the trap that Japan has fallen into, and that is they see revenues decline, and therefore they keep raising taxes, which drives the economy into a slower mode of growth. So revenues are disappointing. Well, we must raise taxes again, and on and on. Japan has been in a recession for 20 years. Greece is in a virtual depression. You look at Hong Kong, no natural resources. It has to import water from the mainland. Yet it has a simple flat tax system for 60 years. And that, with other structural reforms, turned this worthless piece of real estate with no natural resources into one of the most vibrant centers of the world, even with the turbulence you see today. You look at the Baltic states, now under threat from Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. They put in a flat tax, currency reform, and they've done better than their European counterparts. You compare Bulgaria to Greece. Greece in depression, Bulgaria struggling, but because it has a simple flat tax of 10%, it is doing far better than its neighbors in Greece. In fact, 5,000 Greek businesses have moved from Greece to Bulgaria. So what should Mexico do? You must make a radical reform. I urge you to do it. This is your opportunity to become a premier economy, not only of the region, but of the world. and that is enact a simple flat tax. Say, make it low. The finance ministry will say, you cannot do this. It'll cost us money. No, it will stimulate the economy in several ways. If you have a low rate, but have exemptions for adults and for children, so people with low incomes will pay no tax, that's fair. But you have a low rate. That does two things. One is the desire to avoid tax goes down. Russia did one thing right 13 years ago when it enacted a flat tax. Revenues went up. Tax collections went up. The economy went up. Now, they made huge mistakes since then, but they got that one right. And within a few years, 3 years, revenues had doubled because simplicity not only reduced the informal economy, but made it easier to collect from everyone else. So do it with a low rate. We must get over, not only here but around the world, this static mentality that if you cut a tax in one area, you must raise it in another. It is not either or. People are dynamic. You reduce their burden, they will produce more. We see it time and time again. You must also slash your payroll tax. They'll say, that'll hurt revenue. No, it'll make it easier to reduce the informal economy. Better to collect something with a low rate than nothing with a high rate. So the revenue will come in because you'll have a stronger economy. You'll have more capital inflows. You'll have a shrinking informal economy. Right now, the government estimates that your informal economy is equal to 25% of GDP. I've heard higher numbers. 60% of the workforce is involved in the informal economy. Now, the government has taken, and should be praised for several steps they've taken, to reduce the size of the informal economy. Those are to be praised. But slash tax rates and do something on the business tax. Do something like this. Not only cut the rate, which is too high at 30%, cut it in half. Again, the finance ministry will say we can't do it. The only thing you have to lose is prosperity. If you cut that rate, prosperity will come in. And also do this to reduce the informal economy. Pick a number, say 5 million pesos. The first 5 million pesos of profit, no tax. So if you come into the formal economy, you will not be punished for it. Better to get them in the formal economy so these companies can grow. Businesses can learn to expand. Again, better to collect something than nothing. So be bold. I urge you to be bold on that. So in terms of also streamline setting up a business, you've made progress here, setting up a legal business. You should do more. You now have 6 procedures. Cut it to 1. Single sheet of paper or a few strokes on a computer, and it's done. The World Bank does a survey each year called Doing Business, where it surveys over 180 economies around the world. See in these areas where Mexico can learn what is being done right and adopt it here. I mentioned starting a legal business. Do what New Zealand does. 1 step and it's done. No money involved. Transferring of property. Mexico is one of the lowest ranks in the world among the World Bank economies that they survey. Ranks 150th. You have 7 complex procedures. That turns property into dead capital instead of collateral for new capital, creating new businesses. So those are 2 critical things. Drastic tax reform to expand the economy, and urgency in carrying out the reforms you have so nobly begun. Let me say one other thing, and that is, the minister mentioned it about the peso. Our central bank, the Federal Reserve, will eventually raise interest rates. Already, pressure is on the peso because the feeling is if we raise interest rates, that'll have money leave Mexico into the United States. So as we raise rates, you should raise rates too. But let me suggest that you do something different. The peso will come under pressure. Other countries' currencies will come under pressure. You're not going to reduce that pressure simply by raising interest rates. This again will sound counterintuitive, but it is essential. You do have ample reserves. The peso is now under pressure. What the central bank should do now is declare the peso-dollar relationship is going to be fixed. Pick a rate, 12.85, 13.1, pick a rate. Everyone will say, well, you can't preserve it. We tried it in the past. You didn't defend it correctly in the past. What you do is, when the peso comes under pressure, you buy pesos in the foreign exchange market with those dollar reserves. You have enough reserves to buy most of your monetary base. Buy the pesos, and then avoid the mistake that you and every other country makes. When you buy your currency in, you always reissue it into the domestic economy, and the size of the monetary base does not change. Defeats the purpose. Reduce the base temporarily. The speculators, you have more resources than the speculators. You will beat them down. The peso will remain stable, and you'll gain credibility. Credibility will mean more investment coming in. Stability will mean more capital creation. You know better than anyone else, investing is always a risk. But that risk goes up when you don't know what the value of the money you're going to get back 2 years or 4 years or 6 years down the road. Is it going to be 100%, 80%, 110%? That uncertainty means less investment. Think of how much money businesses here in my country and around the world spend on hedging against currency volatility. China did something right in the mid-90s when it fixed the yuan for a while to the dollar, critical for their rapid growth. Hong Kong has done it since the early 1980s. Stability begets more trade. Stability begets more investment. Stability begets more prosperity. So you have the resources to defend the peso. Don't let it go down against the dollar. Don't make the mistake that other countries will make in not knowing how to defend their currency when we raise interest rates in the United States. If you keep this peso stable, you'll become a capital center of the region and of the world. People yearn for stability. Brazil, I'm not sure they know how to do it. Russia clearly does not. They once did, but they don't now. Other countries don't. If you show the way of currency stability, you'll become a capital center of this new emerging world. So in terms of growth possibilities, there is no reason why Mexico shouldn't be growing routinely at twice the rate of the United States. If we grow 2, you should be growing 4 to 6. If we grow 4, you should be easily growing 8. The idea that you must have 1 or 2%, as you've had for years, 2.5% average, is like that baseball player who can't get above 200. Can't be like Derek Jeter. You've got that potential. You've made a magnificent beginning against formidable political odds and against real forces of history. That is an amazing achievement. Now build on that so you can be an inspiration, not only to the region, but to my country on how to get things done. We need reform. You've shown the way to do it. Don't stop now. Thank you. Thank you.